Well, welcome back to our confirmation refresher class. I think we're on session 17. All right. So we're still studying the second article of the Apostles' Creed, where we're talking about Jesus and what he's done for us. Notice the creed doesn't really talk about us a whole lot. It doesn't say, and I did this for God and I did that for God. The creed is all about what God has done for us. Especially in this second article, it's all about Christ. So yes, God has created us, but Jesus also was their creation, and the Holy Spirit was their creation. But Jesus' work that we confess in the second article is the work of his death and resurrection, and his life, and his ascension. And I think we talked a little bit last week about the descent into hell. I guess it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I've lost track of where we are. But
we were last together on the 8th.
Okay. So this week, we're going to look at why a cross? Why doesn't God just say, well, you sinned, but I wave my hand and it's all better? What is a sacrifice? If you sacrifice something, what are you doing?
You're giving it up.
Yeah, you're giving it up. So, to ask why are we giving something up, we go back to sin itself. What happens when we hurt somebody else? They want it made right. It's kind of a natural response. Something went wrong. You're the one who did this. You make it right. Well, sometimes that's easier said than done. Sometimes it is easy. I knocked your chair over. Here, let me set it back up for you. We would think that, well, naturally somebody would do that, right? What if I knocked your chair over and went, well, good luck getting that set back up again, and left? Well, that isn't right. That's kind of mean.
The chair to pieces when you knocked it over.
Mm-hmm. So, when something goes wrong, it is natural that it needs to be made right. Sometimes things go wrong that can't be made right. Karen, you brought up, what if I smashed the chair to pieces? That is entirely possible. I am not a small person. If I come over to your house and you've got a rickety chair and you say, here, Pastor, sit down, and I sit down and suddenly I'm on the floor,
Like the chair next to the front door.
I have broken your chair. Now, I will feel bad and go, oh, how do I make this right? Well, the chair's busted into pieces.
It's an antique.
I can't replace it. What do I do? The thing is that making things right, we hope that when we do something wrong, we want to make things right. We don't always. What if somebody does something wrong to me, doesn't make it right, and I decide to make this right, I'm going to go do something wrong to them?
Don't we call that getting even?
We call that getting even. This person cut me off in traffic.
Oh dear.
I use that example a lot because I usually have some choice words for people when they do that. If Jesus said, if you were angry with your brother, you've murdered him in your heart, I have probably murdered a whole lot of people on the highway. But what if in getting even, I'll use an actual story. There was somebody, I was on the freeway and there's somebody next to me in the other lane, And behind us, we see this guy wildly changing lanes, weaving in and out, being dangerous on the road. Well, the car in front of him starts slowing down. I am back just far enough that that person can't get through, and I match his speed. The car's weaving back and forth, trying to get over on the shoulder, finds out he can't make it on the shoulder, and you can see him honking his horn and cursing like crazy, and I'm sure the guy up front and this guy right here is like, well, we're getting even with you because you're driving recklessly. Do two wrongs make a right? No, they don't. What happens when you try to get even?
You might have an accident.
You make things worse.
You
Or
make
you
things
hurt
worse
yourself.
because what?
Did you have an accident? in
No,
that scenario?
no.
Was he on the way to the hospital and you guys slowed him down?
So
That's possible too.
that's possible too. He ended up finally just dropping behind me and then going on the other shoulder past me. And I'm like, well, at that point, I'm not going to fight this anymore. But the thing is, when we try and get even, sometimes we get that little extra. It's not get even by doing exactly what you did to me to you. I do what you did to me and a little bit more.
One-uppins.
It's
Yep.
thwarting what he wants to do.
And then that person's like, well, that was an overreaction. Now I have to get back at you again. And it just escalates.
That's where we get wars.
Okay, I won't chase around you on the shoulder again this time.
So when this happens in the history of humanity, Karen, you're right. This is where things like wars start coming in, because it's no longer one-on-one. It's this family against this family, this city against this city, this country against this country, and we just are so busy getting even that the fighting escalates. So to make things even, to make things right, is what we're supposed to do when we hurt one another, but we are terrible at it. So we need someone to make it right for us. We need somebody to, and this is what we call justification. I think I used that word a couple of weeks ago as well. Justification is, if you've heard that term, like just war, for a war that's done for the right reasons, or in the Bible where it says Joseph was a just man, it means Joseph did things right. So justification is the process of making things right. Self-justification is the process of making ourselves right, and that doesn't work very well. We need a justification that comes from outside of us. Tied to that word is righteousness. It's a very churchy sounding word because in the Bible we see the word righteousness all over the place, and it just simply means being right. Well, that's easy. I'm right every time I open my mouth. No. If that were the case, we would not sin. Being made right is when Jesus takes our sin and pays for it himself. When the need to make things right is done by Christ. What he gives us is his righteousness, his justification, because we weren't righteous or just ourselves. And that happens by sacrifice, by giving something up. If we harm one another and it's something that we can make right, I give something up. I knock your chair over, I give something up by being the one who picks it up and sets it back and asks, is this where you want it? Is this, is everything okay? I broke your chair, can I replace it? I will make the sacrifice of paying for it out of my own pocket. Now, you may say that isn't necessary, but at the same time, that desire to make things right, to sacrifice of oneself to make things right, is something that in faith we want to have. But in sin, what we have broken is something we can't fix and we can't replace, and no amount of sacrifice on our part makes it right. So we need somebody else to do it. We need somebody else to make it right for us. And that's where Jesus comes in and says, I will sacrifice something that is of enough value to make your sin right. And that's the sacrifice of himself. But this didn't just come out of the blue. This didn't just come that God went, let's send Jesus to be the sacrifice for the sin of the world, and then plop Jesus down 2,000 years ago and go, okay, here you go, here's a cross. Oh, Jesus died, sacrificed for the whole world. And the world goes, wait, what was that again? Because God starts setting it up very early. In Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve made fig leaf garments for themselves, which don't sound comfortable in the least bit.
Have you ever tried rubbing fig leaves against your bare skin?
I try not to rub them against bare skin because bears get very mad when you do that.
I'm trying to imagine somebody doing it. Never.
Bears tend to growl at you. But
Growl too.
But instead of leaving them with that, God gives them clothes made out of the skins of animals. And since we can read backwards in Scripture of what came later, we might even assume that they were made from lamb. It doesn't say that in Genesis. But if it turned out that was the case, we would not be surprised. Abel sacrifices a lamb. Well, we don't know that. It says Abel sacrificed an animal. If it turns out that Abel sacrificed a lamb, we wouldn't be surprised. Cain sacrificed vegetables. And
they screamed loudly.
And so God is not happy with Cain's sacrifice and is happy with Abel's sacrifice. And we find out later it's not because Cain only offered vegetables and God wanted steak or veal. It is Cain offered because that was the law. And Abel offered because he was seeking forgiveness. One was an offering of pat myself on the back, good job me, and the other was, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. So as Genesis goes on, we see more and more sacrifices being made. God has obviously somewhere instituted a system for that God is looking for a sacrifice. The details don't really come about until Moses leads the people out of Egypt, over the Red Sea, up to Mount Sinai, and God says, okay, I need you up here for 40 days. And the people go, okay, Moses, we'll see you when you get back. And Moses goes up, and for the next 10 chapters, you get detail after detail after detail about this thing called a tabernacle. It's a tabernacle.
New word.
Tabernacle is a tent. So let's see.
That's what they carried through the
Yes.
desert. A bunch of poles and
So
tarts and stuff.
yeah. So you've got cloth walls along the outside on poles. And when you come in, there's a bronze altar. We go a little bit further, and there's a bronze basin full of water. And then you get another tent on the inside that is not that is different than these outside walls, but this tent is split into two. And then on one side you've got a I draw it like a menorah because that's probably what they used. The description of it is a 7-pointed lampstand. Now these would have been oil lamps and not like beeswax candles or would they be kind of like the oil candles we have, except not in that shape?
I wouldn't know.
Possibly. But 7 lamps on a lampstand, or 7 lampstands, depending on how you end up translating that. Over on this side, you've got a table with 7 loaves of bread on it. You've got an altar for incense here. And on this table, you also have some extra incense to burn. And then in this room right here, you would drop off your Ark of the Covenant. This room is the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. That's the place where God's presence was. God, this pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night, when the tabernacle was set up, decided, you know what? I'm going inside. It's cold out here. I need a place to stay. No, that's not the reason. But there was a place for God's presence. You did not enter this place. Priests once a day would come in here and offer incense, keep the candles lit. Once a week they would eat the bread, and this was called the bread of the presence because the presence of God was so close by that it was counted as being present in that bread. That sounds familiar.
Pastor,
Yeah.
you said they deposited the Ark of the Covenant. Did they have a reason to move it around?
God said
On occasion.
So when God exited his tent and started moving off in a direction, they'd go, okay, time to take down the tent, pick up the Ark of the Covenant, and follow where God goes.
Okay, so they moved the tabernacle.
Yeah. So the tabernacle moved whenever God moved. If God was not in his tent, it was time to move his tent for him. But where all the sacrifices happened were actually out here. This bronze altar was the place where the people brought their sacrifices. And God himself, from here, lit that fire. We know this because in Leviticus chapter 10, Nadab and Abihu get this bright idea that they're going to come up with this elaborate ceremony to show the people how wonderful they are and how much they love God by bringing the fire themselves. And they bring the fire themselves, and God shoots the fire out of here, lights it, and incinerates Nadab and Abihu. Because they did not do what God said. And we're like, wow, God sure is picky in the Old Testament. Turns out he's picky in the New Testament too.
I suspect that's one of the things I found that's in that book I found this afternoon upstairs. The shocking things in the Bible.
Oh, I can list 100 off for you. The most shocking of which is the forgiveness of sins. But God is the one who lights this altar. The priests, so the people bring their sacrifice in, and the priests are all kind of in this area over here, waiting for their cue. But the first thing they do is wash in the bronze basin. They need to be ritually clean in order to handle God's sacrifice. So they go in, wash everything up. They bring in the sacrifice and they slaughter the sacrifice. They separate out the blood, and there's a reason for that. I've got enough time to get into this. Good.
Seems to me I heard someplace that the wash water wasn't
I'm getting
terribly.
there. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So we're firmly in Leviticus, and how sacrifices work have now been given a structure. When a family comes in to the tabernacle to worship God, they bring 3 offerings. First one is the sin offering. This will be a bull or a lamb or less, depending on how rich or poor you are.
A bull, the judge, you said?
If you're
I
very
said
well
bull.
off, yeah, a bull,
B-U-L-L-L.
a big horned animal that will gore you if you're not careful. A bull is brought in if you're rich. A lamb if you're moderately well off, and it can be less than that if you're poor.
Couple of turtle doves.
Yeah, a couple of turtle doves, pigeons. The Bible uses the same word for both. So the sin offering is brought in. You bring it up towards the bronze altar. The priest comes out and slaughters the animal. You catch the blood in a basin, and you separate out the blood from the animal. And if you've ever seen animal sacrifice, it is a messy, messy business. So the blood is separated. Now the meat, the different parts of the animal have different places they go. The blood is painted upon the corners of the altar and poured around the base of the altar. And the blood remains there always.
That's why they moved that every once in a while.
So if there were people after them, it's blood upon blood upon blood.
Yeah. So the smell of this place gets,
Rank.
it is not a great smelling place. The meat, so we've got the blood is separated and it stands at the altar before God forever. And the life of the animal is in the blood. So the animal, though dead, stands alive before God. We'll see this in Revelation chapter 5 with Jesus himself, the lamb standing though slain. Mm-hmm. But now that the blood's there, the blood is too holy for them to consume. Nobody gets to consume it. It gets placed there. The fat and the guts, the organs, are burned completely on the bronze altar. The meat is cooked and eaten by the priests. I left a part out though. Before the fat and the organs are burned on the altar, they are washed. Do you know where they're washed? In the bronze basin. The same bronze basin that cleanses the priests.
Before or after?
Yes. So it is the same wash water. Now,
Yuck.
when you pull organs out of an animal, what's on those organs?
Feces.
And
Among
blood.
other things.
Everything.
It's nasty, nasty stuff. Yeah, they wash them in there. Are kosher laws there for their health?
No.
Not always. But there's no record of anything happening to them. Turns out that God doesn't want to poison his people this way. So then the meat of that sin offering is cooked, and the sin offering is only complete when the priests finish eating.
Meaning they consume everything, or
They consume the meat.
everything.
Yeah, all the meat. The rest of the innards are burned completely on the bronze altar, and the blood stands.
And they're
How-
doing this in front
how-
of the offering givers.
Yes.
How many of these do you have to go through in a day?
There's a reason you needed a lot of priests,
Oh.
especially later.
Okay.
When it's just Aaron and his family, and then they lose Nadab and Abihu, they're like, I don't think we can eat all this, Moses. And so they needed Levites. If there weren't enough priests, Levites would stand in for the priests and eat the sacrifices. I think that's how it works. I might be wrong on that last point, but by the time we get to Jesus' day, there are so many priests that this isn't a problem. So that's a sin offering. Sin offering, we actually have that. We have something very much like that in our liturgy, only the sacrifice has already been made for us. In our sin offering, we have confession, because in the Old Testament, in the sin offering, the family would place their head on the animal, confess their sins over the animal, and then the animal would be slaughtered. So we have that confession of sins. And at the completion of the offering, the forgiveness of sins was considered to be given. Well, our offering is already complete, so we just announce the forgiveness of sins. So that sin offering looks a whole lot like the confession and absolution in our liturgy. The second offering that you brought 3, was the burnt offering. The burnt offering was the second one in line. And it was not to be eaten by the priests. It was not to be eaten by anyone. It was simply brought to be burned completely on the altar.
This is another bull or sheep or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, it would be another animal based or bird or
Based
something.
on your economic.
Yeah, based on your economic ability.
You have to have a lot of firewood.
So the burnt offering was brought and burned completely
On that same altar.
on that same altar.
It must have been a pretty good sized altar.
Yeah, it was not small. It looks small in the picture, but that's because I only drew it by 3 by 3 inches. Sorry, that was just silly.
Would they just bring them and everybody would just pile on, or would they burn each one separately?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Is that,
They may have.
if they just kept pulling it on, it'd be over top of the altar, off the altar, on the floor.
Yeah, the altar was big enough to handle what they brought, and I don't think they overloaded it. But in this process, the burnt offering, every offering has a little bit to do with atonement, a little bit to do with sacrifice for the forgiveness of sins. But the burnt offering isn't primarily atonement. It is primarily dedication. Lord, we bring this to you in hopes that you will receive it, and in receiving the offering, you will receive us because we are giving you ourselves. And when that offering was received, they had the promise that God had received them.
Meaning burnt up.
Yeah,
It gotta be burnt up to be
Mhm.
complete.
yes. So the offering was burnt up, it was received, and they could go home knowing that God received them.
How often are they doing this?
Depends on the family. If you, the more well off you were, the more often you did it.
And did you do it for an occasion? Like getting married, somebody died, somebody got born?
Yes. Because the last offering is specifically for that. But before we get there, we also have something that's kind of like that burnt offering. It's our dedication to God, our saying, Lord, here's what we have. Please receive this. And when you receive this, when God receives it, he's saying, I'm receiving you. And that is the offering we have in our church. We pass that plate around. We're not putting that offering in there saying, I hope this gets me something good. No, it's our giving to God, our telling the Lord, I want to dedicate this to you, and use this for your good. Use it to spread the gospel, and God receives that. And when he receives that, he also receives you. So that so we've got two parts of our liturgy that are also part of the Old Testament liturgy. There's a third offering in here, and it's called the thank offering. You notice the further away it gets, the more it curves down. The thank offering is the offering that is that you bring in thanksgiving for something. My son is getting married. I'm holding a feast. All right. What do you need? What do you need to feed the people at the feast? I'd like to offer. A thank offering for the fact that I was in a dangerous situation and God saved me out of it. And I made a vow to God that if he saved me, I would give thanks to him, and okay, here's your vow offering. That's also a type of thank offering.
Healthy baby.
Healthy baby. Thanks be to God. Let's have a feast. So the thank offering follows the same procedure as the sin offering, except for one thing. The meat does not go to the priests.
Well, the meat didn't go to the priest in the burnt offering either.
No.
They
So
did in the sin offering.
in the sin offering, the meat went to the priest. In the burnt offering, the meat went to God. In the thank offering, the meat goes back to the people who brought it.
Oh,
So when they're saying how many people or what we need to feed, they're estimating it for that reason.
Yes. So I'm holding a feast for a wedding for my son. I brought in the bull for the sin offering and the lamb for the burnt offering, and 700 fatted calves for the thank offering, because I got a lot of people to feed. A king might do something like that.
The ordinary person would probably bring one lamb
or a dozen eggs, whatever.
or a dozen eggs. Yeah.
So they did not have butchers in those days. They had the tabernacle. So if you wanted meat was I can use this word, was a sacramental act, because you were interacting with God for your meat.
And the blood of the thank offering went on the altar.
Yep, the blood of the thank offering went on the altar. The internal organs and the fat of the thank offering went on the altar. And all the meat went home with you. You had 3 days to finish eating it. If you did not finish eating it in 3 days, you were considered to have profaned the thank offering.
Okay, you took it home cooked, and
Yes.
you got 3 days.
Yeah, you got.
And you took it back for a sin offering.
If you could not eat it in 3 days, you had to dispose of it.
Couldn't you give it away to someone?
I didn't have
So what-
a refrigeration.
What you would do is you'd say, I have more food than I can do. I need to invite more guests.
Heard you about doggy bags.
So-
That would be one way.
So Jesus tells this parable of a king who gives a wedding banquet for his son. And in that wedding banquet, he slaughters the fatted calf, and the feast is ready to go, and he sends out his invitations, and no one comes. So he sends out his servants to go and invite them in person and say, come, the feast is ready, come and eat. And one say, I'm busy with my business. And the other says, I've got crops to bring in. And then there were some that just beat his servants and killed them.
Not a smart thing to do to a
They were
king.
vicious people.
Yeah, not a very smart thing to do to a king. But Jesus was describing how they treated the prophets of the Old Testament.
But are these invitations going out at the start of the 3 days?
Yeah,
The meat
but
comes home, then
it's-
the invitations go out?
so the meat was there, and the invitations went out, and the expectation was all the people would show up and start eating. They had 3 days worth of food there. And nobody showed up. And so before the first day is done, he's sending people out like crazy. We gotta finish this. That's why there's some urgency behind urgency that the Jews would have heard that we don't in that gospel lesson. Oh, he's only got 2 days left. And the people he invited none of them came. What do you do?
This was deliberate.
Oh yeah, this is why in that parable the king said, "Go burn down their cities." Okay, well, it had the sacrifice has been made. Who's going to eat? And so he called everyone that the servants could find. Good, evil, visitors on the road, did not matter. The sacrifice needed eaten.
If you got 2 legs, get in there.
And so the invitation went out to everyone. Come to the wedding feast. And the wedding feast is filled with people. And the king goes down and sees somebody without wedding clothes on. He goes up and says, "Friend, why don't you have your wedding clothes on?" The man doesn't offer an excuse. He doesn't say, "Well, I just came in from work and I could only, this is all I could wear." He doesn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, they got dirty and I wanted to wear the best that I could." He doesn't say, "Oh, I'm too poor to have some." He
What
says,
providing it?
"Don't know." Doesn't say whether he is or not. But nevertheless, instead of answering him, he says nothing.
It is mouthful.
Nothing?
He says nothing to what the king says. "Friend, where are your wedding clothes?" The man says nothing.
Okay, this man wouldn't know that the king was the king?
Yeah, he knew.
Okay.
You remember when the people were beating the servants of the king and refusing to go? The only conclusion I can come to is that this man is one of them and is there under protest. And that's why the king throws him out.
He refused before, and then this time he showed up? Or he just
Yeah,
showed up the
well,
same
he
day?
saw the king burning down the cities and went, "Well, I guess I better show up, but I don't have any plans of showing that king any honor. So,
It's so hard to take all this in because
oh yeah,
they have 3 days, they have no automobiles, they have
oh yeah.
no mail.
Mhm.
How do they get the invitation out?
People
If they're-
had to run.
If they pull them in off the street to come in and eat,
Mhm.
how are they expected to have wedding clothes? I was on my way someplace else, you
Mhm.
know?
So we're not told why.
You're
We're
saying
yeah
that-
we're not. The assumption is that everybody else has wedding clothes.
They were out burning the cities down for the people who didn't come that first day.
Well,
Makes sense to me.
it wasn't just, hey, King, we don't like you. It was, King, we reject your rule.
Oh, okay.
So it was basically they were announcing that an insurrection had begun. And so it isn't just King getting mad because some guests didn't show up.
And
It was,
mind you, this wasn't history we're talking about, this was a parable Jesus was telling.
right.
So you're saying
So-
you might not have worked out all
It-
the details.
Well, not that so much as he's giving you a maybe fictional example to illustrate a point,
Okay.
And
rather than talking about something that actually happened in real
Yeah.
history.
and the actual point was, this is how they were treating God. But in that, by giving that particular parable, it was using the thank offering as that backdrop, and so the people would have understood more about what was going on than maybe we do. But that thank offering covers a lot of things. Pretty much anything that isn't a sin offering or burnt offering falls under thank offering, unless it's one of two things, and that is Day of Atonement offering, daily offering, or Passover.
Which is the Jews celebrate today.
Yeah.
Or this evening.
So Passover is Passover wherever Passover lands is considered a Sabbath, but but during Jesus' day they would offer a Passover lamb sacrifice, and I think I talked about this a little bit when we were talking about Third Commandment and Sabbath day rest. On the day that the Passover lamb was sacrificed at noon, they would blow the horn at the temple, and then they would begin the sacrifices. And that big old pile that we were talking about had a real good chance of happening. But the people ate the thank offering.
And the Passover lamb would have gone home with the family.
Yeah.
To be eaten.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been a thank offering.
Yes. It would have been along the same lines as a thank offering, but because it was Passover, there were particular Passover rules for it.
Right.
Do you know what the word for giving thanks is in the original Greek language? I ask not expect. Yeah, I ask not expecting that anyone knows the
I
answer.
heard it, I know, but I can't.
Eucharisto.
Ah, yes.
And if you've heard the term Eucharist referred to as the Lord's Supper, the Lord's Supper is a thank offering. Because who gets to eat of it?
We do.
We do. But there's something even more special about it. Jesus, it's Passover, and they're expecting the Passover ritual. They're expecting that Jesus is going to start telling the story of the Exodus, that Jesus is going to tell them what all of these things are for, and he throws everything completely out of whack and takes everything out of order, grabs the unleavened bread and the cup and says, "Take, eat, this is my body." And they're like, "You missed a step. Take, drink, this is my blood." "Oh, you're doing something new." We've never done this before, Jesus. Every single Passover since we've been born has been this, and you went and did that. But it turns out everything that Jesus was doing was what Passover was all about. And that it turns out that what Jesus was doing with his sacrifice at the cross was what all of this was about. So we've got a sin offering, a burnt offering, and a thank offering. We have confession, absolution. We have a plate offering, and we have the Lord's Supper. You know, the outline of our liturgy has not changed in 3,500 years. I find that cool, but I'm a theology nerd. When Moses was shown the pattern of the tabernacle, it was a pattern. It was, if I use, I'm not sure anyone's up on their Platonic philosophy. Moses was shown a form. Moses was shown something in heaven and said, go build this on earth. And here's all the details of how to build it. And they built this tabernacle, and the sacrifices took place. When the temple was built by Solomon, he used the same pattern that the tabernacle was built on. And so the temple has the same shape, the same high points, the same geography. And we find out from the book of Hebrews that the pattern that Moses used was Jesus. This is an image of Jesus. So, you know that, you know my favorite story to tell when somebody asks, what would Jesus do? And I say, apparently making a whip of cords and driving everybody out of the temple is now on the table. Because I'm ornery. They come to him and say, what authority do you have to do this? And he says, tear down this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. And he was talking about the temple of his body. Turns out, it ain't far from the truth. In fact, it is the truth. They did not, they're like, it took 46 years to build this version of the temple. And you're going to rebuild it in 3 days? And he's like,
Just watch me.
this temple is the copy. The original is right here, Jesus is implying. And they will tear it down. And it will be rebuilt on the 3rd day. And in that sacrifice, Jesus is the sin offering.
And the burnt offering, and the thank offering.
Yep. But remember how we said the blood keeps getting painted onto the altar because it is too holy to consume? It's too holy to consume because the life's in the blood, and that life is going to stand before God forever. That life of that animal to remind is the appropriate Hebrew word, but it has connotations in English like God's going to forget or something. But it is there as a reminder to God that I have promised the forgiveness of sins. But God does not, that blood is too holy for even the high priest. High priest can only enter this holy place once per year on the Day of Atonement by making sacrifices for himself and then bringing the sacrificial blood for the people and sprinkling it in front of here and hoping he doesn't die and they have to pull him out by a rope.
And they do have a rope attached to him when
Yeah.
he goes in there.
Mm-hmm. So only once per year you get to enter there because this is the Holy of Holies. The blood painted on the altar is too holy to drink, even for the high priest, who is holy enough to get in here. So, I mean, if you have to be holy to even get into this place. You got like level 1, level 2, level 3, and then the blood is like level 4. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but that's the.
Well, how did they decide which priest got to go in?
It was the high priest, and the high priest was.
The oldest one.
Well, what about John the Baptist's father?
So John the Baptist's father, by the time John the Baptist is born, they have a whole lot of priests, and once a day a priest gets to go into the holy place to offer the sacrifices there. But they had so many priests that it was a once-in-a-lifetime event.
Okay, but he was not going into the Holy of Holies, he was just.
No,
going into
he
the
was
holy
just
place.
going into the holy place, I
Okay.
believe. Some of the early church fathers believed that Zechariah was the high priest and was going in here, but the historical records really don't back that up. And there were enough priests that just getting here
Was an honor.
was an honor. And Zechariah's old at this point, and they're like, "Hey, you got your turn! Isn't that great?" Yes, it is. And that was the last words he ever said to anyone else.
Did he die just after John was born, or
We don't know when he died.
he got his voice back
Yes.
when John was born?
I'm curious how the rope on the priest going into the Holy of Holies.
On their
What
ankle?
happened to make them want to do that from then on?
I'm
Just pure
guessing.
fuel?
I'm guessing it is. Well, God could kill you if you go in unworthy, and
We
if
don't
he
wanna-
dies in there, we have no way of getting him.
Someone must have died and they didn't.
It could have happened. We usually come up with things like this to solve a problem.
And usually we don't do anything about it until the problem has shown up and we didn't have an answer for it.
So for holiness, we've got tabernacle is holiness level 1. The holy place where all of this, where Zechariah was, would be level 2. That's my terminology. The Holy of Holies would be level 3, and the blood that is painted on the altar would be level 4 holy. Nobody gets to eat that until Jesus comes and says, "This is my blood." And then when he dies, curtain of the temple is torn in two. Now,
From the top.
I have discovered that there is some argument about this. I have always thought it was the curtain to the Holy of Holies. It could be the outside curtain that was around that kept the Gentiles out as well. Whichever one it was, people who couldn't enter into one holy place can now do so. And if holiness level 3 was out of bounds for us, Jesus brings us to holiness level 4 and says, "Take and drink. This is the blood of the New Testament, or the blood of the New Covenant, shed for the forgiveness of your sins." And we're not given the life of an animal. We're given the life of God. Turns out that's a good life to be given.
That's why I could never understand the Mormons who have their temple, yet not even all Mormons can go in. It is like, well, Jesus tore that temple
Yeah.
too for us so that we all have access.
Right. So, yeah, Mormonism
You know,
gets a little different.
there was a contractor that was in there. There had to be.
That was
Build it.
before they made it holy though, huh?
I don't know.
So,
About the tabernacle and
There's a lot of things they do there.
Yeah, that's what I say.
so this sacrificial system is all built around Jesus, so that when Jesus dies on that cross, they can all go, "That's what it was all about." And on Pentecost Day, Peter and the 12 go out preaching, and 3,000 people go, "That's what it was all about." And they continue preaching in the area of the temple. Now, Herod's temple's gotten more layers to it, and so they're going to be preaching like out here, and I mean, they're not necessarily right here, but the people are gathered. People are bringing their offerings to the temple, and the apostles are preaching there, and more people keep hearing this and going, this animal that I'm bringing today has been fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And they come to faith. And more and more people come to faith. And pretty soon they find out that, wait a minute, it's not just Jews who are coming to faith, it's Gentiles. The people who can't even come in here are now being given the blood of Christ and made more holy than the high priests of the Old Testament.
So when did the Jews quit sacrificing? Or did they
70 AD, the sacrificial system came to an end when the Roman when the uprising was squashed in Jerusalem in 70 AD, and the temple was destroyed.
So they had no place to.
Yeah, there was no place to sacrifice anymore, and they didn't end up returning or having it rebuilt. And in fact,
It's still not.
they
rebuilt.
can't at the moment because the place where this temple was placed for all of those years since Solomon also became a holy place for Islam.
The Dome of the Rock,
And they built one of their holy sites on top of it.
one of their most holy sites.
Yes, one of the
So-
3 most holy sites in all of Islam
So
is.
the only way for the Jews to get the temple rebuilt in the quote proper spot unquote would be to totally destroy Islam.
So
It's not going
But
to
why
happen.
do
in
they
Bible.
need the building when Jesus is the temple?
Well, the Jews
They
don't
don't
accept that though.
yeah, this is where Christians understand we don't need that spot.
We have him.
We have
Jesus.
we don't need the copy, we have the original. So that makes a difference. So that sacrificial system is why Jesus lived the life he did, where he did, when he did. It's why he was circumcised, why he lived a sinless life, why he was raised the way he was, why he went to Jerusalem for the Passover at age 12. Where were you? We were looking for you. Didn't you know where I must be? This is my Father's house. And it is a copy of me. Now, that part didn't get said, but we know that now. This is why he preached and he healed, and why he was betrayed and crucified and died and rose. This whole sacrificial system has been pointing forward to the death and resurrection of Jesus all this time. God didn't spring this on us and go, surprise! He foreshadowed it so hard that you couldn't miss it. Unless you tried. So when we call Jesus our sacrifice for sin, we look back at this and we go, just like we receive baptism and the Lord's Supper, and they give us Jesus. So also when people ate their thank offerings and offered their sin offerings and received forgiveness, Christ had not been born yet, but before the foundation of the world, Christ was crucified for them.
We forget that God is not bound by time.
Right.
He's outside of
So,
time.
so God's already got his whole plan. If God's got it planned, you can consider it done. So he's pointing forward. So he's pointing forward to Jesus in these things. What we have today points back. They received forgiveness of sins. we receive forgiveness of sins. It's all the same system. It's just now that we see Jesus, we don't need the copy. So, yeah. I think that's all I wanted to say on that. Are there any questions about... I threw a whole lot of information at you today. A whole lot of things that are not very familiar. But hopefully I didn't bounce around too badly and leave you too confused.
Thoroughly confused.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.